The night Marcus Hale broke into 14 Ashford Lane, he thought he was the hunter. He wasn't. He had cased the house for 3 days. 3 days of watching from across the street, from behind newspapers, from inside a rusting Toyota that smelled like old regret. The house had been dark every night. No movement, no cars, no sign of life. It looked abandoned. It felt abandoned. But something about it kept pulling at him like a hook buried just beneath his ribs. He couldn't explain it. He told himself it was instinct. Told himself every good thief had a sixth sense for easy targets. He was wrong about what the feeling meant. Marcus crouched at the front door, gloved fingers working fast. The lock gave way in under 40 seconds. He was good. He had always been good at getting into places he didn't belong. The door swung open. The darkness inside the house was different from the darkness outside. Outside, darkness was just the absence of light. Inside the darkness had weight. It pressed against him as he stepped over the threshold. His flashlight caught a narrow beam through it. Dusty air, a hallway, old wallpaper peeling at the edges like skin. He stepped inside. He spun around. The door had locked itself behind him. His hand shot to the handle, turned it, rattled it, pulled. Nothing. He laughed, short, nervous, almost a cough. Old houses, he told himself, old latches, probably just stiff. He would deal with it later. He had a job to do. He turned back to the hallway. That's when the lights came on. Not all at once, not like someone flipped a switch. One by one, a lamp at the end of the hall, a dim glow from a room to his left, a single bulb at the top of the staircase, swinging almost imperceptibly, casting slow shadows that moved like breathing. Marcus didn't move. Every instinct in his body was screaming. And then, from somewhere deep inside the house, from somewhere that sounded like it was inside the walls themselves, came a voice. Low, calm, certain. Marcus. His blood turned to ice. The voice knew his name. And then just above a whisper, like someone who had been waiting a very, very long time. You finally came back. Welcome to StoryNest TV, the home of stories that don't just entertain you, they stay with you. Today's story is about a man who thought he chose a house at random, a desperate thief, one dark night and a door that locked from the inside. But this is really a story about memory, about guilt, about the past that never lets you go, no matter how far you run from it. Who was the voice? What is this house? And why, out of every house in this city, did Marcus Hale end up here? Stay with us until the very end, because nothing in this story is what it seems, and the final reveal, it will change everything you just heard. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now. You do not want to miss what comes next on this channel. And if you know someone who loves a story that gets under their skin, share this video with them right now. Let's get into it. Marcus Hale had not always been a thief. There was a time, not so long ago, when he was just a boy who wanted to make his mother proud. A boy who carried her groceries up 4 flights of stairs without being asked. A boy who stayed out of trouble, kept his head down in school, and believed with the kind of pure, unshakable faith that only children possess, that the world was essentially fair, that if you were good, good things would find you, that love was a permanent thing, that home was a place that waited for you. That boy had been buried a long time ago. Life had piled enough dirt on top of him that Marcus had stopped looking for a shovel. He was 31 now. The rent was 3 weeks overdue. His daughter's school fees were due by Friday. His phone buzzed with 17 missed calls from a number he recognized and feared, a man he owed money to, the kind of man who didn't believe in payment plans. His reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror that morning had looked back at him like a stranger.
hollow eyes, a jaw tight with tension that never fully released anymore, hands that hadn't done honest work in longer than he cared to admit. Those hands, though, steady, careful, precise, had found their only reliable talent in taking things that didn't belong to him. He told himself he had limits. No violence, no weapons, in, out, clean, invisible. He was not a bad man. He was a desperate one. And desperate men, he had discovered, were extraordinarily skilled at manufacturing reasons, at building small, convincing arguments inside their own heads, at looking in the mirror and seeing someone they could still, just barely, live with. He had spotted the house 6 days ago. It happened by accident, or what he believed at the time was an accident, a wrong turn on Ashford Lane, taken on a night he was too distracted and too tired to correct it. The street was quiet, tucked away from the main road, like something the city had forgotten to demolish. And at the very end of it, separated from the nearest neighbor by a long stretch of overgrown grass and old iron fencing, sat the house. Large, dark, still. He had slowed the car without deciding to. Something about the house pulled at him in a way he couldn't name and didn't try to. He'd learned long ago not to question his instincts. They were the one thing that had kept him alive and uncaught for as long as they had. So when his gut said, look, he looked. When his gut said, come back, he came back. 5 nights in a row he drove past it, watching, waiting. No lights, no movement, no mail collected from the rusted box at the gate, no car, no sign that anyone living had been inside it recently. It looked abandoned. It felt abandoned. It felt in the way that certain places feel things before our minds catch up, like something waiting, patient, still, like a held breath. He told himself it was the perfect target, isolated, forgotten, probably full of antiques and old valuables that no one had touched in years. One night's work, enough to cover the rent, the fees, the man with the 17 missed calls, enough to buy himself another few months of the life he was barely maintaining. He told himself he had chosen it. He had absolutely no idea it had chosen him first. On the 7th night, he parked 2 streets away and walked the rest. Dark clothes, dark gloves, a bag over one shoulder with tools he'd used so many times they felt like extensions of his own hands. The night was cold and still. No wind, the kind of quiet that has texture to it that you can almost press your fingers into. He reached the gate, pushed it open. It moved without sound, which surprised him. Everything else about the property looked like it hadn't been touched in years, but the gate's hinges were clean, oiled. He filed that thought away without examining it. The path to the front door was cracked down the center, weeds pushing through the concrete in thick, determined clumps. He walked it slowly, scanning the windows out of habit. Dark, all dark. His breath made small clouds in the cold air. Somewhere behind him, far down the street, a car passed. He waited until its headlights disappeared, then turned back to the door. The lock was old, a simple deadbolt, the kind they stopped manufacturing 20 years ago. His pick had it open in under a minute. The door swung inward. The darkness inside was different from the darkness outside. That was the first thing he noticed, and it was the kind of thing that under normal circumstances he would have dismissed immediately. Darkness was darkness. It had no personality, no character, no intention. He knew that. He was a practical man. But the darkness at 14 Ashford Lane had weight. It pressed against him as he stepped over the threshold. It had a temperature, colder than the night air outside, which made no physical sense but was undeniably true. And it had something else, something he had no rational word for, a quality that made the small hairs on the back of his neck rise one by one, slowly, like a warning being spelt out in a language older than words. He stepped inside anyway. The door swung shut behind him. He heard the lock click. He spun around immediately, grabbed the handle, turned it hard. Nothing. He turned it again, rattled it, put his shoulder against the wood and pushed. The door did not move. Marcus stood very still for exactly 3 seconds. His mind ran through the logical explanations quickly and efficiently, the way a trained mind does when it is trying very hard to not acknowledge what it already knows. Old latch, warped wood, draft from inside caught it, any of these things, all of these things. He turned back to the hallway, and that was when the lights came on. Not all at once, one by one, slowly, deliberately, a lamp at the far end of the hall, casting a dim amber glow over peeling wallpaper and dusty floors. A faint light from a room to his left, seeping under the door like something cautious. And at the top of the staircase, a single bare bulb swaying almost imperceptibly back and forth, sending shadows moving across the walls in long, slow arcs that looked disturbingly like breathing.
Marcus did not move. Every instinct in his body, every finely tuned, street-tested, survival-honed instinct he possessed was screaming the same word over and over. Leave. And then the voice came. Not from a speaker, not from upstairs, not from any identifiable location at all, from everywhere, from the walls and the floor and the cold air itself. Low and calm and absolutely certain, the voice of someone who has been waiting so long that waiting has simply become the condition of their existence. Marcus, his name, his full name, spoken by something that had no business knowing it. He stopped breathing. And then, in a whisper that somehow carried more weight than a shout, slow and deliberate and devastating, "You finally came back." He did not run. Running was what amateurs did. Running was what people did when their minds had already surrendered and their legs were simply following orders. Marcus Hale had been in tight situations before, more than he could count, more than he was proud of, and the one thing that had always kept him one step ahead of disaster was the discipline to stay still when everything inside him was screaming to move. So he stayed still. He pressed his back against the locked door, flashlight sweeping slow and steady across the hallway in front of him, and he breathed, in through the nose, out through the mouth, slow, controlled. His eyes moved the way he had trained them to move, methodically, missing nothing, assigning threat levels to everything they landed on. Peeling wallpaper, dark flower pattern, faded almost beyond recognition. Wooden floor, dusty, undisturbed, no footprints but his own. A narrow side table against the wall with a lamp on it, the one currently glowing that dim amber, its shade slightly tilted. A coat hook on the wall with nothing hanging from it, a framed piece of needlework he couldn't read from this distance. Nothing moved, nothing breathed. "Hello?" His voice came out smaller than he intended. He hated that. Silence swallowed the word whole. He exhaled. Old houses made sounds. Everyone who had ever spent time in them knew that. Pipes contracted in the cold. Wood settled under the weight of years. Wind found its way through gaps in walls and window frames and produced sounds that the human brain, wired for pattern recognition and threat detection, was all too eager to interpret as voices, as words, as names. That was all it was. That was the only thing it could be. He pushed off the door and moved forward. The sitting room opened up to his left, a wide archway leading into a space that smelled of old fabric and cold ash. He swept his flashlight through it without stepping in. White sheets draped over furniture, the shapes beneath them bulky and indistinct. A fireplace on the far wall, dark, a pile of cold ash sitting in it like the ghost of a fire that went out long ago. An armchair facing the window with its back to him. And above the fireplace, a row of picture frames. He almost moved on. Almost. But his flashlight snagged on the largest frame the way a nail snags on cloth, and he stopped by himself, and he looked. A family portrait, the kind that gets taken professionally, in a studio, on a day that everyone dresses slightly better than usual. A woman sitting in a chair at the center, mid-30s, tired around the eyes in the way that parents of young children are always tired, but beautiful. Genuinely and quietly beautiful, the kind of beauty that has nothing to do with effort. A man standing behind her, one hand resting on her shoulder, his face turned slightly away from the camera so that his features blurred at the edge of the frame. And beside the woman, pressed against her knee, a boy. 6 years old, maybe 7.
Gap-toothed smile, both front teeth still growing in, dark eyes that caught the light of the photographer's flash and held it, gleaming, curious, alive. A red shirt with something at the collar, a small imperfection Marcus couldn't quite make out from this distance. He stared at the boy for a long time. Something moved at the back of his mind, faint, formless, the way a word moves at the tip of your tongue when you know it, but can't quite reach it. A pulling sensation, not painful, but insistent, familiar in a way that made no sense because he had never been in this house before. He had never stood in this room before. He had never seen these people before. He turned away. The kitchen offered nothing useful. Empty drawers, a handful of old utensils, a wall calendar frozen on a month from years ago that he deliberately did not calculate. He moved through it quickly and headed for the staircase. Valuables live upstairs, they always did. Jewelry in bedside drawers, cash in shoeboxes in the back of wardrobes, small things that fit in pockets and paid large bills. He was halfway to the stairs when the temperature dropped. Not gradually, not the slow creep of cold that you register over minutes. All at once, like stepping through an invisible curtain, the air around him dropped by 10 degrees in a single second. His breath fogged in front of him. He looked down and watched it happen, the warm air leaving his lungs, becoming visible, dissolving. He stood completely still, and the voice returned. Closer this time, much, much closer, not from the walls, not from everywhere, from directly beside his left ear, quiet and deliberate, the way someone speaks when they are standing close enough to touch you and they want to make absolutely certain you hear every word. You left without saying goodbye. Marcus moved so fast he slammed his shoulder hard into the wall. His flashlight swung wildly, shadows exploding and contracting across every surface. He held it out like a weapon, turning a full circle, breathing hard. Nothing. No one. Who's there? His voice had no performance in it now, no control. I said, who is there? Show yourself, right now. The house answered him with silence. And then, at the top of the staircase, a door swung open its own. Slowly, deliberately, the way a door opens when someone on the other side is making a conscious decision to open it. Not blown by a draft, not disturbed by vibration. Opened. Intentionally. Completely.
He stared up at it for a long moment. He should have gone back to the front door. He should have put his shoulder into it and kept going until either the door gave or he did. He should have pulled out his phone and called someone, anyone, and stood in that hallway with his back against the wall until help arrived. Every sensible, rational, self-preserving instinct he had ever developed pointed in the exact same direction, away. But the door at the top of the stairs was pulling at him with that same wordless gravity that had slowed his car on Ashford Lane 6 days ago, that same hook beneath his ribs, that same feeling that was not quite fear and not quite recognition, but lived in the uncomfortable space between them. His foot found the first step, then the second. He climbed. The room at the top of the stairs was a child's bedroom. He knew it immediately, before his flashlight had fully swept the space, the way you know certain things before you have enough information to know them. The scale of it, the particular quality of the silence inside it, softer than the silence in the rest of the house, as if this room had been specifically insulated from the harshness of the world outside. A single bed pushed against the wall, a faded blue cover tucked in with military precision, a small wooden desk in the corner with a chair pulled slightly away from it, as if the person who last sat there had just stood up. Drawings tacked to the wall in clusters, crayon and pencil, the unsteady, fearless lines of a child who has not yet learned to be self-conscious about their art. Rockets and houses and stick figures holding hands. A shelf of books with broken spines and bent corners, books that had been read and reread and loved until they almost fell apart. And on the desk, a shoebox, plain, worn at the corners, the lid sitting slightly askew as if it had been opened recently. Marcus crossed to it. He stood over it for a moment without touching it. Something in his chest was doing something he couldn't name, a pressure spreading slowly like a crack moving through glass in real time. He recognized it distantly as the feeling he got when he was about to know something he couldn't unknow. He lifted the lid. Photographs. A thick stack of them, loose, slightly curled at the edges, the colors slightly faded in the way that photographs fade when they have been kept in a box in a room that no longer has anyone to look at them. He picked up the first one and held it under the beam of his flashlight. A woman in a kitchen, laughing at something off camera. Young, tired in the way his mother had been tired, not defeated tired, but the tired of someone who is carrying something heavy and has made peace with the weight of it. One hand raised, waving the photographer away. Afternoon light coming through a window above the sink, falling across her face and shoulders at a specific angle, a specific quality of gold. Marcus's hand started shaking. He knew that light. He knew that kitchen. He knew the exact sound the pipes in that kitchen made on cold mornings because he had lain in bed as a child and listened to them and found the sound comforting in the way that only the sounds of home are comforting. He picked up the second photograph. The boy again, older now, 9, maybe 10, standing in a backyard he recognized before he could stop himself from recognizing it, squinting against a summer sun, wearing a red shirt with a small tear at the collar that had been carefully, lovingly stitched back together with dark thread. Marcus's free hand moved to his own collarbone without his permission. He turned the photograph over with fingers that were no longer entirely steady. On the back, in neat, small, slightly slanted to the right, the handwriting of a woman who had written him permission slips and birthday cards and little notes tucked into lunchboxes. 4 words. My boy, come home. The flashlight slipped from his hand. It hit the floor and rolled under the bed, plunging the room into near total darkness. Marcus didn't move to retrieve it. He couldn't move at all. He was standing in the center of a room he had spent 20 years running from, holding a photograph of himself as a child, reading 4 words in his dead mother's handwriting. And the wall he had built, thick, high, reinforced over 2 decades of deliberate forgetting, came down. All of it, all at once, like it had never been there at all. He was 11 years old when he ran. He remembered it the way you remember the worst night of your life, not in sequence, not cleanly, but in fragments that arrive without warning and leave without permission. The smell of antiseptic in a hallway, a social worker with kind eyes and a clipboard, someone telling him in a rehearsed, gentle voice that everything was going to be okay, that he was going to somewhere safe, that people were going to take care of him now. He remembered pulling his hand free and running through the door and not stopping. His mother had been sick for 2 years, the slow kind of sick that doesn't take everything at once, but dismantles a person quietly, piece by piece, the way water dismantles stone. She never complained, not once. She packed his lunches and stitched his torn shirts and laughed in that kitchen with the afternoon light falling gold across her shoulders, and she never once let him see how frightened she was. He was the one who was frightened, and when the fear became too large to carry, he did the only thing an 11-year-old boy knows how to do with something too heavy to hold. He dropped it and ran. He ran for 20 years. Different cities, different names people called him, different versions of the same broken life. He built a wall around that night and never looked at it directly and told himself he had survived, which is not the same thing as healing, but feels enough like it that you can go years without noticing the difference. Until tonight. Until a wrong turn on Ashford Lane that was never really a wrong turn at all. He slid down the wall of the bedroom and sat on the floor with the photograph pressed against his chest, and he wept. Not the quiet, controlled kind, the other kind, the kind that has been waiting 20 years for an exit and takes it without asking. I didn't know, His voice was barely sound. "I didn't know this was your house. I didn't know it was still—" He stopped, tried again. "I left you alone, and I have been running ever since, and I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to be anything other than someone who takes things and disappears." He pressed the back of his mouth. "I became exactly what I was running from." The room was still, and then the voice came one final time, softer than it had ever been, warmer, the warmth of something that has waited without bitterness, that has held a door open in the dark for 20 years without once considering closing it. "Then stop running, my boy." He sat in that room for a long time after that, long enough for the cold to settle into his bones, long enough for the crying to exhaust itself and leave behind something quieter. Not peace, not yet, but the possibility of it, the first faint outline of it on the horizon, the way you see dawn before you see the sun. When he finally stood, something had shifted inside him. Not fixed. Nothing this fractured gets fixed in a single night, but shifted, reset, the way a dislocated bone feels after it has been set back into its place. Painful, tender, but finally, pointing in the right direction. He walked down the stairs. He stopped at the fireplace and looked at the portrait one last time. The boy with the gap-toothed smile looked back at him across 30 years of distance. At the front door, the handle turned freely. Of course it did. It had never truly been locked. The only thing that had ever been locked was him. He stepped out into the night and set his bag of tools down on the front step and left it there. He kept only the shoebox. He walked down the cracked path towards the street and made one quiet, irreversible decision: to stop taking from the world and start building something in it instead. The house stood silent behind him. No voice, no flickering lights, no swinging doors. Just a house, waiting 20 years for a lost boy to find his way home. And when he finally did, it let him go. That is the story of Marcus Hale, a man who went looking for something to steal and found something he had lost instead. Here is what I want you to think about tonight. Some of us are Marcus, running from a door we are too afraid to open, carrying a weight we have never put down because putting it down would mean standing still enough to feel it. And sometimes, just sometimes, life leads us back to exactly the place we have been running from, not to punish us, not to trap us, to free us. If this story moved you, drop a comment below right now. Tell me what you felt. Tell me if you've ever run from something that was quietly waiting for you to come back. I read every single comment and I want to hear from you. If you are not yet subscribed to StoryNest TV, hit that subscribe button right now, because this is only the beginning. Every week we bring you stories that don't just entertain you, they stay with you long after the screen goes dark.